Hi guys, so today we're going to make our steak and kidney pie. So first of all we need to make the pastry, and for that we're going to need to weigh out on our scales 400 grams of flour. It does depend on the size of your tin. Mine is a 9-inch tin, so it's quite big. So we do need quite a bit of pastry really, because remember you've got the top to cover as well. So I'm just going to weigh that out in here. I'm not too worried about sieving because it's pastry, so it's quite coarse anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's not like a cake, but you can if you want to. So that's quite a lot of flour, as you can see. That's going to go into my bowl, and then I'm going to weigh it out. I'm going to cut up my butter into cubes just to make it easier. Mine's been in the fridge, so it's really hard to cut. And what you need is 250 grams of butter that's been cubed, okay? So again, into your bowl. Sorry, you probably can't see this. I'm using the paper to cut it on. That's me being lazy, really, to be honest. So what I'm doing now is I'm just cubing the butter, and then I'm going to pop that into my weighing bowl. It just makes it all very much easier if it's cubed. Okay, so and keep doing that until you've got 250 grams into your bowl. And then you're going to pop that into the flour. Okay guys, so my butter has been cubed up, and I'm going to pop that into the flour. I'm also going to add a little pinch of salt. Not lots, just a little bit. And the last ingredient before we rub it together and make it into breadcrumbs is 1 egg, but only the yolk. So if you just, what you want to do is, I'll show you. So I've got my cup ready. I've just tapped it so there's a hole in there. I'm going to open it up and let the white fall out. And then one method is to keep transferring the yolk between the eggshells until the white separates from the yolk. Or if you want to get your hands in, because your hands are going to get mucky anyway, pop the yolk into your hand and just sieve it through your fingers like that. Okay. And then once you've got the egg yolk, pop that into your pastry as well. Okay. So what you're going to do now is move those things out of the way. Doesn't matter that my hands are mucky because it's egg that's in here anyway, so that's okay. And I washed my hands before. So what we're going to do now is we're going to mix that all together with our fingers, breaking down the bits of butter until we get fine breadcrumb type texture, which I'll show you in a bit. So I'm going to rub it through your fingers like that. So I'm going to do this and then get back to you when it's the right texture, because it will take a while, so you don't want to watch me do the whole lot. But you need to rub it through your fingers. If the butter is hard, because mine was in the fridge, then it will probably be more difficult, but I'm sure you'll be fine. So give it a go. It will get there eventually, and I'll see you in a minute. Once your pastry looks a little bit like this, so like a breadcrumb type texture, that's when you know it's ready to be put together and rolled out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to do that. So first of all, you want a clean surface. I've just cleaned this off. And you need to put some flour down so that the pastry doesn't stick. So wherever you're going to be rolling it, just move the other bits and pieces out of the way. Make sure that you've got flour on the surface. And you might need to add more of that, obviously, if it becomes too sticky. So then what you're going to do is you're going to try and make your breadcrumb textures into a ball that can be rolled. So keep squashing it into the bowl It is a bit challenging, this bit, trying to get it to stick together. You might have to add water and stuff in a bit as well, if it just isn't having it. Because pastry does like to be a little bit difficult sometimes. So I'm just going to squash that together as best as I can. And then add some water if I need to, and pop it all on the top and squash it together on the surface now. Okay, so it's kind of coming together a little bit into a ball, as you can, well, into a mountain, as you can see, sort of. There you go. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this into a ball. Now the best thing to do is to have a little cup of water to the side, so you can keep, excuse me, so you can keep adding little bits of water as and when you need to. Okay, so just go and get that. So I've got a cup of cold water at the ready. I already know it's not sticking together very well, so I'm going to put some on. I'm only going to sprinkle a bit on, because the last thing you want to do is actually then make it too one extreme to the other. You don't want it to go from dry to really sticky, because it isn't supposed to be really sticky. So, and it will eventually stick together. Now, see, you have to get the balance between adding the water and then realising when it's a bit sticky now, so I might have overdone it a bit, and add a bit of flour, okay? And that's the balance to get it to hold together. So trying to get it into a ball, that's the main objective. That's not going to fall apart when we roll it out. Okay, so I think we're getting there. Okay, and it will stick to you. You will be kind of covered in pastry, but that's okay. That's the joy of baking. So just pop a little bit of water in the middle as well, and a bit more flour on the outside. So when you do the water, it's a good idea to do the flour as well, so you're balancing it, and make sure that the flour is on your work surface as well, so that it doesn't stick to your work surface. And eventually, if all goes to plan, you should get some nice pastry like this that's ready to roll. Okay, perfect. So we're going to do some rolls in a minute. People recommend putting it in the fridge for an hour now, wrapping it in cling film and putting it in the fridge. You can do that if you want to. It helps it stay together. So if you're having trouble with it staying together, then that might be worth doing once you've got it into some kind of shape, so that it can be easily wrapped and stuff. I'm not going to. I'm going to hope for the best. So now I'm just going to gently roll it, and roll it a little bit one way, turn it completely 180 degrees, and roll it a little bit the other way. And this is so that it stays in the sort of shape you want it to stay in. Now we've got a circular tin, so I want it to kind of stay relatively circular in shape. So when I made the blob of pastry to start with, I made it in a circle, round shape. And now I'm trying to keep that shape by keep turning the pastry. Okay. Now there is going to be too much pastry, obviously, because we want some for the top and some for the bottom and sides. It's going to get more and more difficult to turn now, so you may need flour again. As it gets thinner, it will get harder to turn. It might stick to the table a little bit. So I'm just going to put some more flour in. Okay. Oh, the joys of pastry. I do love it though. It's worth it, because it's so much nicer when it's your own pastry rather than shop bought. But guys, if you want to do shop bought pastry to save this hassle, do it, because a lot of people do that, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using shop bought. For anything like puff pastry, I would use shop bought. So nothing wrong with it whatsoever. Okay. So we want it quite thin, because we don't want a really thick pastry base. It's getting quite big now, which is good because that's exactly what I want. If you need to patch any bits up, then patch them up as you go along. I've got a bit of a hole going on there. The good thing with pastry, you can kind of patch it up and then just roll it again to get it flat again. And to get it all sticking together again. It's the thing with short crust pastry, is a crumbly pastry, so it will be difficult sometimes to roll and to shape. But I'm sure you'll give it a damn good go. Okay. So we're almost there now. Probably don't want it to be too much thinner now, just a little bit more so that it fits fully. Do need it to be big because it's got to fit the bottom of the tin without any issues. And go up the sides as well, again, without any issues. So, now here comes the very tricky bit. We're going to prepare the tin, and then the tricky part is putting the pastry in the tin. So okay guys, so we're going to try in a minute and transfer the pastry over to the tin. Now there's a trick with this, apparently. We'll see if it works. If you roll your pastry as best as you can around a rolling pin, or even just the end of it if you can, so that you can pick it up, because if you try and just pick it up, it's going to all fall apart, which looks like mine's going to anyway. And then, yeah, mine's fell apart. But it's okay, you can patch pastry up, it's not a problem. So, at least it's at the right amount thickness that I want, which is fine. So I've put it in, and there's a lot of gaps, obviously, to fill around the side. So just make sure that it's pressed into the sides, and then I'm going to use the rest of the pastry to patch up the holes. So you can just see there's some holes which I'm going to patch up. You won't notice this once it's baked, by the way. You won't notice that you've patched it up or anything, so that really doesn't matter. It just means that it's very short crust pastry, which means it'll be crumbly, which is nice, so that's fine. Okay, so going to take the edges off for now. Now, the one thing you really don't want to happen, I'm going to do the sides in a minute, by the way, as well, is for this to expand and contract and end up being either too small for the tin or being raised up in the tin. So we're going to use greaseproof paper and baking beans, which I'll show you in a minute. And we're going to blind bake it. Okay, so I'm just going to patch up the rest and then I'll come back to you. That's what it looks like with the baking beans in, guys. You don't have to use baking beans, by the way, because obviously they can work out expensive to buy. So if you don't have baking beans, which is fine if you don't, just use something like rice. That will work just as well, and obviously afterwards you're going to have to throw your rice away, but you can use that, it's fine. So okay. I'm just going to blind bake the pastry now. So I've just put the cooker on, and I've put it on gas mark 6, which is 200 degrees, depending on whether you've got a gas mark or an electric cooker. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop the pie case in. As you can see, on high to medium shelf. And then we're just going to leave that in there to cook for about 10 to 15 minutes. We just want to start the cooking process. Sorry, we don't want to do the whole cooking process, okay? So bear with me, guys. So while your pastry case is blind baking, or you can do it after if you prefer to have it to take it out of the cooker first. We're going to then prepare the meat ready to go inside. So I'm just going to give my hands a good wash, and then I'll be back. First of all, guys, I'm just going to get a pan and put a good tablespoon or a couple of tablespoons, if you think you need it, of oil into the pan, and put that on the hob ready, because the meat is going to go into here. I'm going to put it on a very low heat just so that it starts to get warm, but I don't want it to be sizzling away over there while I'm cutting the meat, so just so it's ready to put the meat into. Okay guys, so now we're cutting up our kidneys. So what we need to do for this is remove the white bits from the middle. And as you can, you'll feel it, it's like a gristly bit. You don't want that. Stringy bit, you don't want that in there because it won't be very nice when you're eating it. So you can't probably buy pre-chopped. If you go to your butcher, they'll probably sort this bit out for you, and that might be a bit easier for you. So you're going to need in your, or you can just cut round it if you want, if that's another way. So chop, rather than chopping it through the middle, chop round the edges and cut round it. If you need help with this, or you need to use any gadgets, like the gadget we've sent you last week actually might work for this. You might be able to put that in, hold it in, and then chop around it so that it keeps it still for you, because the fact that it moves doesn't make it very easy. So I've got 2 kidneys there, nicely chopped, so I'm going to pop that. Also, again, you don't have to use kidneys, by the way, just use more beef if you don't want kidneys. So that's also gone into the pan now. So I'm just going to clean up the space, because obviously there's meat and everything going on here, and that's not going to be very good for doing the next sections, which involve vegetables, and you don't want to cross-contaminate. So I'm going to clean up this space in a moment. And then I'll come back. Okay guys, so we've got our meat in the pan. It hasn't really started to sizzle yet, which is fine because I don't really need it to just yet. Well, I don't really want it to be doing that while I'm doing other things like cutting things up. So it will start too soon though. So I'm just going to turn it up a tiny bit. Because what we want to do now is we want to brown the outsides of all the meat that's in here. And then we want to make sure that it's cooked through but not overcooked. So you probably only need to cook it on here, making sure you're turning everything over, of course, constantly as well, for probably about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, but make sure it's cooked to your liking. When it's in the pie, when you put it back in the oven later, it obviously will cook more, but the last thing you want is it to not be cooked through to your liking. So cook it relatively well now, but not too much. Okay guys, so we're going to get a nice fresh chopping board because we're cutting something different now, and a nice fresh knife. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to chop our onion. You can also, by the way, if you like mushrooms, you can put mushrooms in this. That'll be quite nice in here as well, but you don't have to. So I'm going to get our gadget from last week, which you can use for the meat as well, by the way, but you'd obviously have to wash it in between. And I'm going to pop it into the onion, and I'm going to peel down as much of this outer sides as I can, so that it's easier to separate it. So if you could, so I've took the 2 ends off, which you can do with this in it, by the way, as I showed you last week, but I just did that to make it easier for me now. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop it in half down the middle, and again, that's it. And then every couple of prongs, because I don't want it really thin, I'm going to chop again like that. Okay, like that. So then if we pull it off, we'll get some nice flat pieces, which will be much easier now to chop on your chopping board, with or without your So again, if you get one of your slices and you pop this in, you can then use it to slice around to do the onion. We sort of want onion pieces like that. We don't want anything too huge, but we still want to be able to get the taste and texture, and we want to know we've got a piece of onion in it. So just going to chop that up. There we go, that will be absolutely fine. So it's quite roughly chopped because it doesn't need to be fancy for this recipe. Okay, so I've now put the onions into the frying pan, as you can see there, and I've turned it down because we're going to do that put that on for now for about 10 minutes, but we don't want everything overcooking, so really low heat. Okay, what we're going to do next, once that's been on for 10 minutes, we need to flour everything that's in there and season it, and then it'll be onto the stock next. Okay, so I'll speak to you soon. Okay folks, so I've just taken that off the heat for a moment, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a decent handful of flour into the pan, and I want to mix this so it all gets coated in flour. Okay, so all your meat and everything else that's in here gets coated in flour. And then you're going to fry very lightly again, and before we put in the stock, and that's pretty much, and the seasoning. So that's just frying lightly now, so on a low heat, because everything's probably cooked, to be fair. We don't want to overcook everything. We just want to get that flour into the mix. So I'm going to leave that now for a couple of minutes, and we're going to go and make the stock. Okay guys, so I've got a jug ready, and I've got my kettle which is just boiling. Just put the hot water in there and it's boiling away. We need 600 mils of hot stock. So what I'm going to do is use 3 beef stock cubes, which I'm going to crumble up a little bit into the jug, and then I'm going to make it up to 600 ml with the water. So just bear with me. Okay, there we go, and make it up to 600 ml, which is here, with the water. Okay, so it's quite a lot. Right, so going to give that a really good stir, and then we'll finish off by adding some more flavourings. Okay guys, so here's my beef stock ready. So I'm just going to add some Worcestershire sauce now, about a tablespoon. So I love Worcestershire sauce, so I'm going to add a bit more. And then we want a teaspoon of garlic to be added into there as well. We want to add some thyme. You will have dried thyme, because obviously fresh thyme would go off. I couldn't get hold of any, so I've had to use fresh thyme, so I'm going to have to pull it off the sprigs. Make sure that, and add that in just like this. I could chop it, probably be quicker actually to do that. There we go. And add that in. Okay, so some nice thyme in there, and then I'm going to also add a bay leaf, all for nice flavours in the gravy. Okay, so 1 bay leaf, mix that around so it gets nice, and then you're going to add that straight in to your pan that's on the heat, on a very low heat. Okay guys, so I've just poured all of the stock into the pan, and you want it to thicken now with that nice flour you put in there earlier. So leave it on a relatively low heat and just let it kind of simmer away and start to thicken. Keep an eye on it. You do want it to be a nice thickish gravy, so that it's not too wet in the pie case, obviously, and too thin for when you do it. But if it doesn't start to thicken, you might have to add a bit more flour. So have your flour ready, leave it for at least 5 minutes first, and keep an eye on it. If it's not thickening, add a little bit more flour to it. Okay, so guys, I got my pie case out. I will say, which is quite funny really, while I was doing, because I started to do the inside of the pie while I was waiting for it to cook, I completely forgot, and I left it in there for a good half an hour, which is way too long. However, it'll still be okay, we'll survive, and it just shows you that it's quite easy to get it wrong really. So sometimes it's easier just to do the pie case first, take it out, and then do the middle. Okay, so here's my pie case. I'm going to take out the baking beans and the
Okay, so I'm just going to take out the baking beans and the piece of paper.
I'm getting my tin ready to put them back in. I don't really want them to go everywhere if I can help it. That's it, put them back in my tub. Ooh, very, very hot, so don't do what I just did. Find something to get the remaining ones that are in the bottom out. That's it, okay. There we go, and put them to one side. So my pie case actually doesn't look too bad considering it's been in a bit longer than it should have been. I'm just going to clear up this mess while I'm going to keep an eye on my steak and kidney cooking over there as well. And then hopefully soon we can put it all together and put the lid on. Okay guys, so I'm just going to do my pie lid now. My filling is almost ready, so I'm just going to get the pie lid ready. So as you did before, again you might need some water. So I'll get my just quickly grab a bit of water and add, because it's possibly gone a little bit dry. So that's better. Okay, because you do need it to stay together a little bit. Okay, so now I'm going to try and roll it out to a nice circle shape, ready to go on the top of my pie. Okay, so just rolling it out as you did before, and you need it to be big enough to go over the entire top of the pie. So it's getting harder to turn now. Okay, just getting the bits that have stuck in the rolling pin off. That's it. Again, you might need to patch up areas, but that's fine because it will look fine once it's baked. Okay, so don't want to go too much thinner than that now. I think that's probably thin enough. And if I just get my pie tin, which is a little bit hot, so I'm not going to, that should cover the pie fine. Okay, so just waiting, guys. So my filling's pretty much ready. And as you can see, it's thickened quite a lot, so that's the sort of texture you want, the thickness you want. Again, you may have needed to add more flour if you did need to. Okay, I'm going to pop that into the pastry case, and then we're going to pop the lid on top. Okay, so guys, this is going to go now straight into the pastry case carefully, like so. And that just fills that case quite nicely actually, because you don't want it overflowing. Okay, lovely. So what we're going to do now is I'm just going to trim the edges a little bit, and then we're going to put the pie lid on top, and we're going to use an egg wash to stick the pie lid down, and also an egg wash over the top. So guys, okay, the same as before, we're going to get an egg, and we're going to break the egg. And we just want the yolk. So as I did before, I'm just going to swap it into the two and then jiggle it around in my fingers. Okay, so we want the yolk and we want it to be whisked up. So I'm going to get another cup now to, in fact, no I'm not, I'm going to empty that out. I'm going to put the yolk into there. I'm going to whisk it up with a fork. Then I've just trimmed the edge of the pie there, and I'm going to use my brush just to brush a bit of egg on the edge because it needs to stick. And as I overcooked the pie bottom, it shouldn't have been fully cooked, and it is fully cooked. It's going to take a bit of more difficult to stick, so I'm going to use quite a bit of egg. And fingers crossed. So plenty egg on the edge there, like that. That's it. Okay. And then we're going to try and lift up our pastry and lay it on top. Okay, just like that. Right, now we are going to have need to patch it up a little bit, I think. I'll trim those edges off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to crimp the edges, which basically means pinching it with your fingers, and that's to help keep the top and the bottom together. Mine's going to be very rustic, by the way, but that's okay. If it tastes alright, not that I'll be eating it, but if it tastes alright for somebody else to eat, then that's fine. Okay, I'm just going to patch it up a little bit. Okay, so mine's going to look really nice and rustic, and then what you need to do is pop a little hole in the middle to let any steam escape, and again give it a really good egg wash, particularly if any bits have started to break away and you've got any holes. You want to try and get those filled in. Okay, and then it goes back in the oven for just to cook the top, really. So you need it to go back in the oven for about 10-15 minutes. Just keeping an eye on it, because it may need less or more time. Put plenty of egg on the top. That's it. And then any patch up bits, just finish off. That's it. Okay, pop that straight back in the oven now, and then we'll see what it looks like in a bit.